What's going on, Malakis? VNNCC3 here, and in today's video, I'll be talking about Faction Wars because I believe that I figured out how Faction Wars are going to be conducted. That's right, Scoobs! I think I've cracked the code. But if you don't know anything about Faction Wars and you're sitting there scratching your head like I am kind of right now, wondering how I figured it out, then you're definitely not alone. The only things the devs have provided to us is a brief description of how everything's going to go down without going too much into detail. I believe Faction Wars will be conducted as per the following. Man, that's actually kind of hard to make all those syllable sounds. It really is, Scoobs. As a disclaimer before I begin, just as an example, I don't believe that we'll only be able to use champions from the Bannerlords on specific days, as in we cannot use other champions from other races/factions. The reason I say this is because the current 12 races/factions would provide a 12-day calendar schedule. I don't see this happening because, as an example, it would take a very long time for the Bannerlords, just as an example, before they could become available again after they go on cooldown. This would mean many players would have to keep a very tentative schedule if they're looking to complete specific races/factions, because much like the dungeons here, they're only open on certain days. I'm not saying this is impossible, but if you listen to the next part of the video, I'll attempt to persuade your opinion otherwise. Here's what I think will happen. We'll be able to choose champions from the 4 races/factions that are under each row. For instance, if you've noticed, this one right here says Talarians. In my opinion, that will be the entire faction. This means that you'll be able to select champions from the Bannerlords, High Elves, Sacred Order, and the Barbarians. I also believe that the Talarians are going to be the absolute strongest faction because they have stupid, dumb, overpowered champions like Martyr, Baron, Lysandra, Saint Nick, Roshguard the Tower, just to name a few, and the list goes on and on, Venus and all that stuff. Anyways, the list continuously goes on, man, it really does. All the champions that I just mentioned and then some are absolutely ridiculous in every single game mode that's currently available. Again, what makes me believe that it'll be done in rows is because having 12 different days to sort out would be an absolute nightmare for those that are trying to actually do the content. One could make the argument that having 12 different days would bring a variety to the game. In some instances, I would agree, but for those that are free to play, that almost spelled disaster for them. The reason I say this is because most people don't even have the ability to make a competent team of 4 champions that can do all the content as is. This would be increasingly difficult if you only had to pick 4 champions from one specific race/faction. What I mean by that is, not everybody has the ability to pretty much 3-man Dragon level 20. Ooh, that's not half bad either. One of the other reasons I don't think it'll be done with the current 12 is because some races/factions like the Skinwalkers only have 19 champions to pick from, while other factions like the Sacred Order here have 49 to pick from. I find that it would make it very lopsided and would spark a lot of complaint and even problems because not everyone is on the more pay-to-play side. This would also possibly promote not being able to go through the races/factions like the Skinwalkers, just to name the one really, because they only have such a few amount of champions to select from. This could also potentially create a major paywall in order to hurdle over the content. I'm going to go ahead and pick on the Skinwalker race/faction yet again because you pretty much need to have epics or legendaries to pretty much get through the game unless you've got some severely good artifacts to put on your current champions. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous to use the race/faction like the Skinwalkers, I know I keep picking on them, to basically hurdle over through the other endgame content. Like, the only Skinwalker that's ever really used that I've seen in much higher level gameplay is really just Steel Skull, and that's pretty much about it, and that's with the clan boss. Yes, I know, legendaries like Longbeard and Mr. Smashlord here are used inside of the arena, as well as the Rain Beast, but those are all epics and legendaries. I wonder how many free-to-play/very moderate pay-to-play players have heaps of these types of champions just laying around. The reality starts to set in when you realize that 90% or more of the actual player base doesn't have access to such champions. They really don't. In my opinion, the devs would be shooting themselves in the foot for making it only one type of race/faction that you can use per day that it's open. Not just because of the lack of people owning the decent rares, epics, or legendaries inside those race/factions, but most people don't have a decent set of artifacts that they can use. For those that do have a decent set of artifacts, try and think about how much silver you'll be spending just transferring those artifacts over to your other champions as they need it. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of silver and some decent artifacts, but I'd like to imagine that that's pretty much less than 10% of the overall player base that plays this game. Imagine having to pay upwards of 900,000 silver per champion you want to use because you only have 5 sets of decent artifacts. Most people's economy would absolutely go bankrupt trying to keep up with the daily activity. I understand that this is primarily being made for the paying side and more so to the whale end of the users, but for the majority of the users, meaning 90% or more of Raid's player base, this means disasters in terms of progress because the above mentioned. I for one have a very nice account and all, but I don't even have sets, as in plural, to kit out all of the teams that I could possibly be making with all my champions. Sure, I have access to getting those types of artifacts, but I'm still on the grind for better gear. That's just crazy how much damage Juliana did, and Bad L's the one putting all the poisons and AoEing everything down. As it trickles in, I'll be handing off my older pieces of gear to my other champs that I'm either testing or that I don't use all that much. If they do indeed make it so that you can only use select champions from the particular race/faction, then I guess everyone that isn't overly paid to play like the whales are will have lots of problems moving forward. Never didn't have it, that's all I'm gonna say, Scoobs. Want to buy Torvald, he's absolutely insane. I'm kind of a fan of the struggle, but in the end, I can see there being an absolute ton of problems with only being able to select from, again, yes, I know I'm using the Skinwalkers as an example, but from 19 champions. And what's killer is that most aren't even all that great, especially for even being an epic. Now, I understand that not every group of races/factions are gonna have a champion selection problem like the Skinwalkers have, but by simply adding more champions, you're upping the difficulty for the champions that you would really like to get, like Xavia. A crazy part is that some people have a crazy tinfoil hat theory that we ourselves are going to be the factions, as in we're in a pool of the sort, and we're using our champions to combat the upcoming campaign/dungeons, so on and so forth. It'd be interesting to see them have players compete against each other by placing us all in a tournament-style format where we're all trying to get points by completing the chapters and other content a part of that faction war. Other games have done very similar things to this idea, like Castle Clash, and it actually turns out to be a lot of fun because everyone tries hard to participate and get points. If they did this by clans, this could also make a very large problem because having all of the whales all in one faction would make it completely lopsided for anybody else to compete against them. They could stop this by placing each individual account in a tournament-style bracket like they do with the tournaments, all players will be placed into a group at the blah 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 blah. I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts and ideas are, so please leave a comment down below. I'd be very interested in seeing what everyone else thinks. That's pretty much it for this video. I'd like to thank you for stopping by to spend some of your quality time. But y'all know what I'm talking about though, right? Love, peace, and chicken grease. Be safe, but above all, stay classy.